Today, we're digging into the first truly global conflict. A war so huge, so all-encompassing, they didn't even have a number for it yet. They just called it the Great War. And believe me, it was. This wasn't some small regional fight. It was a fire that jumped borders, redrew the entire map of the world, and really set the tone for the whole 20th century.
But here's the real head-scratcher. In the summer of 1914, Europe seemed like it was on top of the world. There was peace, progress, new inventions. Things were looking up. So how on earth did it all go so wrong, so fast? How did a continent that seemed to have it all together just dive headfirst into the worst war humanity had ever seen?
All right, let's get into it. The thing is, this war didn't just pop up out of nowhere. Underneath that shiny surface of peace and progress, Europe was actually a mess of tensions and rivalries. It was, for lack of a better term, a powder keg, just waiting for a spark. So, picture this. Europe had basically split itself into two big armed camps. It was like two rival gangs staring each other down. In one corner, you had the Triple Alliance, the Red Team, with Germany and Austria-Hungary as the main players. And in the other corner, the Blue Team, the Triple Entente, which was this kind of weird alliance of France, Britain, and Russia. With everyone tied together like this, you just knew that if one of them got into a fight, they were going to drag everybody else in with them.
So what was fueling all this tension? Well, it boils down to three big things. First, you had imperialism. All these big European powers were scrambling to grab colonies in Africa and Asia, and they were constantly bumping heads. Second, militarism. It was a massive arms race. Everyone was building bigger armies, bigger navies, basically flexing their muscles. And third, nationalism was on overdrive. Every country was convinced it was the best, and you had all these ethnic groups, like the Serbs, desperate for their own independent nations.
So you've got this whole continent that's practically soaked in gasoline, just waiting for a match. And that match? It was struck in a city most people had never even heard of, Sarajevo.
Okay, so it's June 28, 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who's next in line to rule Austria-Hungary, is visiting Sarajevo. A young Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip is there to kill him. Now the crazy thing is, the first assassination attempt that day actually failed. A bomb went off but missed the Archduke's car. But then, in a twist of fate you just can't make up, the Archduke's driver takes a wrong turn and stalls the car literally right in front of the cafe where Princip was standing. This time, he didn't miss.
And after that single shot, the dominoes just fell. And they fell fast. Austria-Hungary points the finger at Serbia and declares war. Russia, seeing itself as Serbia's protector, starts mobilizing its massive army. Well, that freaks Germany out, so they declare war on Russia. And since France is Russia's ally, Germany turns around and declares war on them, too. I mean, it's just dizzying. In a matter of weeks, the entire continent is at war. Now, for a minute there, it looked like Britain might just stay out of it. But Germany had this master plan for a quick victory, the Schlieffen Plan. The idea was to knock out France by invading through neutral Belgium. Big mistake. Britain had a long-standing treaty to protect Belgium. The second German soldiers crossed that border, the British Empire was in. The powder keg had officially and spectacularly exploded.
You know, almost everyone thought this war would be over by Christmas. The soldiers marched off with smiles on their faces, thinking they'd be home in a few months. Boy, were they wrong. What came next was a kind of hell that nobody on Earth could have imagined.
So what was it actually like for the guys in the thick of it? All those parades and dreams of glory? Yeah, that vanished almost overnight. It was replaced by a brutal, grinding, terrifying new kind of reality.
On the Western Front, the war basically became one word: trenches. Both sides just dug in, creating this incredible, zigzagging network of ditches that stretched from the North Sea all the way down to Switzerland. This wasn't a war of movement anymore. It was a war of just sitting there, waiting to kill or be killed. And life inside those trenches? It was an absolute nightmare. Imagine the constant, deafening roar of artillery shells and the non-stop rattle of machine guns. Soldiers lived in mud, surrounded by rats and disease. And to break the stalemate, both sides started using terrifying new weapons, like poison gas. That chewed-up, crater-filled wasteland between the trenches had a perfect, chilling name: No Man's Land. So for 3 solid years, this bloody stalemate just drags on and on. Millions of men die fighting over a few feet of muddy ground. It really seemed like it would never end. But then came 1917. And in 1917, the whole game changed. 2 massive events completely flipped the script. First, Russia just collapses. The Bolshevik Revolution happens, and the new communist government pulls Russia right out of the war. That's a huge win for Germany. But just as one major enemy drops out, a new giant steps in. Germany had been sinking any ships it could find, and that finally pushed the United States over the edge. America declared war.
The arrival of the American troops was the beginning of the end for Germany. We're talking hundreds of thousands of fresh soldiers, well-fed, well-equipped, pouring into France. The German army, on the other hand, was absolutely exhausted after 4 years of brutal fighting. They just couldn't keep up with the sheer manpower and resources the US brought to the table. The tide had turned, for good.
With the Americans in the fight, the end came pretty quickly, but here's the kicker. The peace that followed the war would turn out to be just as important as the war itself. In fact, it pretty much guaranteed that an even bigger, bloodier sequel was coming just 2 decades later.
By late 1918, Germany was on the verge of collapse. Their armies were being pushed back, and people at home were starving. The German generals knew the game was up. So, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918, the armistice was signed. And after 4 years of unimaginable noise and violence, the guns on the Western Front finally fell silent. But the peace treaty that came next, the Treaty of Versailles, wasn't about healing. It was about punishment. It had this infamous war guilt clause, making Germany take 100% of the blame for starting the war. Then it piled on crippling financial payments, stripped Germany of all its colonies, and basically dismantled its military. It was designed to crush them.
And the cost. My God, the cost was just staggering. The best estimates put the number of dead, both soldiers and civilians, at over 15 million people. Millions more were wounded, both in body and in mind. An entire generation of young men was just gone.
After all that loss, you can understand why people wanted to believe it meant something. They wanted to believe that humanity had learned its lesson. So they gave it this famous and, as we now know, incredibly tragic title, The War to End All Wars.
But was it really the war to end all wars? Not even close. That harsh peace treaty left Germany humiliated, angry, and economically destroyed, the perfect breeding ground for extremism. So the Great War didn't end war at all. Its broken peace treaty led directly to the rise of Adolf Hitler and a second, even more catastrophic World War. It wasn't an ending. Turns out, it was just a 20-year ceasefire.